we could definitely use a little bit of water like that. Maybe we want it higher or lower. Now we cannot move the water level. It's a single plane at the mid level. What we can do is move the world. So there's two buttons here, move the world, and this one, scale the world. Right, so we're scaling with the left button, we make it bigger and smaller, and that of course tends to make it appear as it's coming out of the water too. But you may want to actually also just move it vertically without changing its scale, and that's with the right button now. Right, so that also will allow you to go a little bit above, and then you can of course move the camera to go above the water and above the ground. All right, let's see. The fog is pretty close. We want the fog level farther away so we see a bit more into the distance. Let's see what else. Let's scale it back down a little bit. Maybe that was too steep. And bring the terrain back up. I don't need that much water. I just need a little bit. There, something like that. Kind of a dry river, right? And that fits well with the riverbed texture that we have for the bump map. Now, there's a couple of other things. We may want to come closer to that ground so we see a bit more of that fine elevation and the bump map there. And then perhaps a little bit less on the global illumination, more contrast. Let's see what else we could do. Let's work on the water. So the water by default has breakers on. Let's zoom in here so we can see that a little bit better. We will try to keep this current position, but we can zoom in a little bit and also turn the camera into the water. There you go. And see what else we can do here. So increase the pre-filter a little bit. That will reduce those extremely high peaks. Then we have the water. So let's make it refractive and render. So now we start seeing into it, but it's at a shallow angle, so the Fresnel angle has been reached and is mostly showing a reflection. We can, however, go to the world option and add a few more things. We can increase the scattering here, make it, let's say, something like 15, and that may give it a little bit more of a bluish tint. Let's make it extremely high, let's say 55. Yeah, there, definitely. Now it's kind of glowing in that color. You can also add caustics, and those may need a nice boost as well, so that you can see them at this angle. And then there's also the ground fog that adds a nice little mist here. I like that a little bit higher. Let's make it 22. There, a nice little mist, very subtle, just above the water level here to make it look like that water is emanating some moisture into the atmosphere. Right, the water might be a little bit too bluish, too turquoise. You can click that to make it a little bit different. Maybe you want to make it more greenish, conducive to the presence of life forms, some plants, some algae, some green stuff, right? And let's see if we have just what we need here. Maybe we can move the camera forward a little bit and look down at a more steeper angle. And let's go high quality with the anti-aliasing. So now we're starting to see some interesting mix of waters. There's also a little bit of darkening above the water. The ground is wet when the water is so close, so we darken it just a tiny notch a little bit. And I think that's pretty neat. Let's go and find our position for the final render. So first of all, let's zoom out a little bit. Something that allows us to see and enjoy and appreciate both the sky and the landscape. And the sun is still far away from the other sun here, the one in the background sky. We might want to, well, let's look around. Maybe, sometimes you look around and behind you there's another beautiful scene. So you'll want to do a panoramic. And in fact, we'll probably do in the next tutorial a little rotational panoramic. So we just shoot like 60 frames at increasing angle. Then that way we can pick the one we really like. So sometimes that's the trick, right? Don't do just one, do a whole bunch, and then let the customer decide, or if you are the customer, let you decide which one you really like. Let's go and choose something like this here. It's always good to have some features in the front nearby, and then I'm gonna keep this angle, but I'm gonna move the sun to appear back in a different view. Not exactly up front, but close, so we have some interesting shadows also. You can see a shadow forming here nearby. We'll want to keep that shadow, that's for sure. Something like this here. That's cool. Let's go and make the quality better on that render and on the shadow. So to do that, we'll go back to the render options. And in there, we have ray steps. I'm going to reduce it to about 0.02 and maybe even smaller. And that will give us more fine detail. Now we see the shadow a little bit better. Let's try 0.01. Now, the more you reduce this ray step, the more fine detail you'll see, but it's going to take longer to render, especially once you have that anti-aliasing enabled, the AA level. I'm going to go to a very high number here, let's say 40. I've done higher, by the way. I've done 200, 400 even. But that's probably for this level, this size of image and this level of detail, it's probably going to be fine. There is one more thing I could do, and that's to make this even smaller. 0.06 maybe will still take. There's a level where it's just not seeing much to render because it's too small. But here, there, it did another update. But you notice it took about 3 seconds for this one render. And if we have 400 of them in the anti-aliasing, or 46 of them, that's going to take a little toll on my patience. But that's okay. We are here to make a good final render impression. So let's see. Maybe a bit more soft shadow. So the shadow quality, if we increase this, instead of 4, we'll give it 14. That should give us a softer shadow. If you look at the edge here, in about 2-3 seconds, it's gone now. So that's too high. So let's go about 9 perhaps and see what that does. That should give us a soft shadow. There you go. I think that's good enough. We have one more thing we could do on the GI samples or the quality. Experiment with these numbers, but don't do that at highest resolution and when it takes like a minute per render. But once you're done with all these options, perhaps a little bit more water height, right? Perhaps a little bit more turbulent water, more wind presence that will disturb this water surface a little bit more. And there you go. I think we'll go with that. And then, so now we have everything, including the anti-aliasing steps, and let's go anti-aliasing enabled. And that will, in many cases, that will immediately trigger a render. So do that only as a last resort, because now it's time to wait or sip on my coffee, as we say. And I actually have a cup of coffee here. It's early morning. Thanks for watching. We'll be posting the final render on this, and then we'll go to another tutorial to do a bit of animation with this. We may want to first also work on the terrain itself. We didn't do anything really with that terrain other than just take the existing picture, turn it grayscale, and that's about it. But we could add more to the terrain itself, the height map. We can add erosion, we can add sediments, we can add all sorts of visual effects that make it even more interesting looking, right? And that's the thing about it. If you want to do a scene that looks realistic or interesting or both, you want to have a lot of things that challenges your visual cortex, that makes the brain look all over and seek out details, and things that coordinate and that are synced up. The shadow directions, the light source location, how you see the specular highlights on the bump maps, and that sort of thing. So all of this coming nicely together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.